Have you ever been caught off guard? Not by power, but by courage so quiet it made you feel small? That was exactly what happened to billionaire CEO Preston Wycliffe one gray autumn morning in downtown Chicago. Preston had built an empire through grit, structure, and unshakable daily rituals. He was not the kind of man who paused for feelings. Not anymore. His mornings began with the same rhythm: 5:45 a.m. wake up, 6:30 spin class, black coffee at 7:15, executive suite by 7:55. His corner office on the 44th floor of the Wycliffe Logistics Tower offered a panoramic view of the skyline: glass, steel, and progress. Everything inside that office gleamed with minimalism, precision, power. But at precisely 8:02 that morning, someone shattered that order. A clear, almost melodic voice broke through the silence. "My mom is sick, so I came instead." Preston froze mid-email. The voice didn't come from his assistant, nor from the intercom. It came from the doorway. And when he turned, he wasn't prepared for what he saw. There, clutching a tote bag full of cleaning supplies and wearing an oversized janitor's shirt, stood a small black girl, no more than 8 years old. Her shoes were scuffed, her braids were tied back neatly, and her eyes held the kind of quiet defiance you only see in people twice, maybe three times her age. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Preston asked, slowly standing. "I'm Ava. My mom, Miss Lorene, she's your office janitor. She got hit by a car this morning. Her arm's broken. The doctor says she can't work for a while, but I didn't want her to lose her job, so I came instead." And just like that, everything in Preston's world, a world dominated by numbers and decisions and quarterly returns, came to a grinding halt. Now let's pause here for a second. As someone who's worked with executives and seen how tightly wound their lives are, let me tell you, this sort of moment, it's a glitch in the matrix. Billionaires don't get interrupted. Children don't just appear in corporate sanctuaries. And yet there she was, this tiny person brimming with purpose. Preston looked at the time. 8:04 a.m. He had a golf meeting with two international shipping partners at 9 a.m., a deal worth 9 figures. He hovered over his desk phone, thumb near the intercom. "Call security." His assistant, "Tell this child to leave?" But Ava didn't budge. Her shoulders were squared, her chin was lifted, and her voice didn't shake. "I know I'm small," she added, "but Mama says you're very particular and that this floor has to sparkle." Preston blinked. For the first time in years, he remembered his little sister Lainey. Same kind of spark. She used to sneak into his study as a child, rearranging books, always helping. She died young, a car accident, and there wasn't a day Preston didn't feel the phantom of her laughter in the corners of his memory. "You came here alone?" he asked. "Bus 24. I've been here with Mama before. I know the way." Something tugged at his chest. "All right," he finally said, "but no touching electronics, no opening drawers, and if you get tired—" "I won't," she said quickly, almost before he finished. He pressed the intercom. "Marcia, cancel my 9 a.m. Reschedule the Carlton Club meeting." A beat of silence. "The Carlton Club, sir." "Yes, cancel it." When he hung up, Ava beamed. "Thank you, sir." Preston watched her cross the room and begin wiping the edge of his desk with a cloth too big for her hands. She cleaned with a kind of reverence, as though the act itself held purpose beyond the task. And you know what? I think that's what struck Preston the most. The honesty of it. In a world where everyone tried to impress him, Ava wasn't performing. She was just doing what needed to be done. "You missed a spot," he said after a moment, half teasing. Without pausing, Ava reached for the corner and wiped it twice. "I didn't miss it. I was coming back to it." Preston raised an eyebrow. This girl was sharper than most interns he'd hired, in Boulder. "You ever cleaned an office before?" "Number. But I clean our church basement every Saturday. Pastor Larry says I'm better than the last janitor." That made him chuckle. "You have a very direct way of speaking. Mama says if you do a job, do it right. No excuses." She was 8, and somehow she was teaching him more about work ethic than half his staff. He poured 2 cups of tea, 1 chamomile, no caffeine. "This won't stunt your growth," he joked, handing her a cup. She sipped cautiously. "Smells like apples. It's my sister's favorite." You talk about her like she's gone. Preston blinked. She is, he said. She passed when we were teenagers. I'm sorry, Ava replied gently. You have sad eyes when you say her name. Mama gets that look too when she talks about my grandma. Let me just say this. Children notice everything, especially children who've grown up with less. They read faces, moods, silence, because their survival depends on it. They sat in silence, sipping tea as the sun rose higher outside the glass wall. For the first time in over a decade, Preston Brooks wasn't checking the markets. He was watching a little girl adjust the edges of his photo frames so precisely, it was almost artistic. You remind me of Lainey, he said finally. Ava looked up. Was she brave? She was, and stubborn. Then I'll take that as a compliment, he smiled. Later that morning, he took her to the executive cafeteria, somewhere no child, let alone a janitor's daughter, had ever set foot. When they entered, all conversation stopped. Forks hovered midair, but Ava didn't flinch. She sat at the window like she belonged there. What would you like? He asked. Chicken noodle soup. Mama's recipe has ginger. It burns, but it helps. He walked to the kitchen and asked Linda, the head cook, Can you make it? Linda blinked. That's not on the menu. Do it anyway, and extra ginger. Ava ate with dignity. No slurping, no mess, just gratitude. This tastes like hers, she whispered. She must be a great cook. She's everything, Ava replied. That's the kind of line that makes you reevaluate your whole life. When they returned upstairs, she resumed cleaning, and when she was done, she placed the cloth back in her tote bag, stood tall, and asked, Will Mama still have her job? Preston knelt, a rare motion for him. His knees cracked. She will, and I'll make sure she knows what you did. Ava smiled, then bit her lip to hide it. As he walked her to the elevator, she looked up and said, You're not as scary as Mama said. He laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. Still a little scary, she added with a wink, and the doors closed. Some people walk into your life and don't leave footprints. They leave roots. That was Ava, a quiet storm that rearranged everything she touched. The next morning, Preston Wycliffe arrived at the office even earlier than usual. He told himself it was habit, routine, discipline, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was hoping she'd come back. There was something about Ava Ellis that unsettled him, not in a bad way, in a necessary way. She'd stirred the still water of his world, made him look at things, at people, he'd trained himself to ignore. He walked into his office and immediately noticed something had changed. His desk, polished, his picture frames, aligned. The faint scent of lemon disinfectant lingered in the air. Then the intercom buzzed. Mr. Wycliffe? It was Marcia. There's a young girl downstairs asking to see you. He didn't even hesitate. Send her up. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Ava stepped out. Same oversized janitor shirt, but today it was tucked under a soft lavender hoodie. She held a thermos in both hands and a brown paper lunch bag tucked under her arm. I brought soup, she said simply. Mama made it, said I could bring some to you. Preston blinked. You brought me soup? Ava grinned. Chicken noodle, extra ginger. She said you might need it. He took the thermos gently. You didn't have to. I know, she said, placing her bag of cleaning supplies in the corner like she'd been working here for years. But I wanted to. You ever met someone who just belongs in every room they walk into, no matter how small they are? That's Ava. And I think Preston knew it too, even if he couldn't say it yet. As he poured the soup into a small cup, the steam rose, and something about the scent made his throat tighten. It was the kind of comfort you can't buy, only earn. Do you want to read while I eat? He asked. Ava had brought a battered copy of Charlotte's Web. She flipped to a page and began reading aloud softly. Her voice filled the office like music that didn't need a speaker. When she reached the part where Charlotte writes some pig in her web, Preston paused his spoon midair. My sister used to read that part out loud, he said. Made it sound like Charlotte was delivering a sermon. Did she love animals? Too much, he chuckled. Snuck in a stray cat once. Told our parents it followed her home. What happened? They kept the cat, he said with a faint smile. They laughed. But behind the laughter was something deeper, memories trying to claw their way back to the surface. As Ava swept the floor later that morning, she spotted a dusty edge behind the bookshelf. "Can I move this?" she asked. Preston glanced up from his emails. "That big one with the old frame," she pointed. He walked over. Together they pulled it out. It was a photo, black and white, of a young girl on a swing, mid-laugh, arms stretched wide like wings. "Lainey." Ava leaned closer. "She's pretty," she whispered. "She was," Preston said. "My sister." "What happened?" He paused. "She died in a car accident. I was supposed to pick her up that day. I was late. She walked." Ava didn't say "I'm sorry" this time. Instead, she placed her small hand on the frame and said softly, "You should hang it back up." He stared at her, this girl who somehow knew what to say without being told. "I think I will." This right here? That's the part that gets me. Sometimes it's not wisdom that moves us. It's innocence. Ava wasn't offering pity. She was offering presence. And sometimes that's all we really need. Around 10:15, Preston received a call from legal. He waved it off. Instead, he watched as Ava aligned every pen on his desk, each one facing the same direction, perfectly spaced. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comforting. Then came the knock. It was Glenda, one of the janitors. Gray curls pinned neatly, paperback in hand. "Well, if it isn't the rising star," she said, grinning. Ava beamed. "Hi, Miss Glenda," Preston gestured. "Come in. We were just talking about soup and swing sets." Glenda eased into the chair by the window. "You know, Mr. Wycliffe, this little one's made quite the impression. I haven't seen this floor so cheerful since, well, ever." "She's certainly shaken things up," he admitted. They chatted for a while until Ava pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote you something," she said shyly. Preston opened it carefully. In neat handwriting it read, "Dear Mr. Wycliffe, thank you for letting me help Mama. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for being kind, even though everyone says you're not. You look better when you smile. Love, Ava Ellis." He folded the note slowly, throat tight. "Do you always write letters?" he asked. "Only when it matters," she said. "This one matters," he whispered. "That line? That's when I knew the story wasn't just about Ava. It was about Preston, too. About the man he could have been if life hadn't taught him to build walls instead of bridges." At noon, Preston walked her to the lobby. "Do you think I could visit sometimes?" Ava asked. "You don't need an excuse, Ava." She smiled. "Maybe next time I'll bring cornbread." He laughed. "I'll look forward to it." As she disappeared through the doors, Preston stood frozen. A man once surrounded by boardrooms and forecasts, now clinging to a hand-drawn letter like it was a roadmap. Back in his office, he pinned the letter beside the photo of Lainey. The room felt warmer, like some of the ghosts had finally learned to sit still. The next morning, his assistant brought in a sealed folder marked urgent. "Legal issue?" he asked. "No," she said, pausing. "It's from Ava." Inside was a drawing. Two stick figures, one tall, one small, smiling. Above them, cartoon speech bubbles. Tall. "Want some soup?" Small. "Only if you don't spill it this time." Preston chuckled aloud. Beneath the drawing was another note. "Dear Mr. Wycliffe, I couldn't draw your office for the scholarship brochure, so I made a letter instead. It's unfinished, but I hope you like it. Ava Ellis." He didn't read it twice. He studied it, like scripture, like instruction, because it was. Later that day, Sandra called from the hospital. Her voice was tentative. "Mr. Wycliffe, there's something you should know." "What is it?" "It's Calvin. He called." Preston stiffened. "Calvin Ellis, Ava's absentee father. He wants to meet," Sandra said. "Says he has proof you gave Ava unfair benefits." "Of course he did. What does he want?" "Money, headlines, leverage." Preston sighed. He'd dealt with power-hungry men his whole life. But this wasn't business. This was personal. He looked at the note in his hand. Then he said simply, "Tell him I'll meet him. Public place. I'll bring my attorney." The following morning arrived with cold Chicago winds curling around the tower. Preston Wycliffe sat in his office, his usual early morning calm replaced by an electric edge. Today was the meeting with Calvin Ellis. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. At exactly 11 a.m., he walked into the community center's side room, flanked by his legal counsel. The folding chairs were crooked, the lighting harsh, and at the far end of the table sat Calvin, grinning like he held the winning card. "Glad you came," Calvin said, his voice smooth, oily. "I want to keep this peaceful." Preston didn't sit. Define peaceful. "I want my name acknowledged," Calvin said. "You put my daughter's name on a corporate scholarship without my consent. That's my blood, my family. I deserve a cut, or it goes public. Papers, lawsuits, you know the drill. You abandoned Ava." "I didn't abandon anyone. I just wasn't around." "You weren't around when she cleaned my office. You weren't around when her mother broke her arm. But now that there's press and praise, you show up?" Calvin leaned forward. "Come on, I'm not asking for much, just recognition. Maybe a board seat on the outreach program. Think of it as optics." Preston narrowed his eyes. "Let me be clear. This scholarship wasn't built because of Ava. It was built because of what Ava showed us, what she is. It's not a reward, it's a reflection." "My lawyer says this is still a liability." Preston turned to his counsel. "Prepare a formal response, but make this clear. We're not negotiating with opportunists." He stood to leave. Calvin's voice followed him. "People like you, man, always protecting your image." Preston paused at the door. "I'm not protecting my image, I'm protecting hers." And then he walked out. You know, there's something rare about seeing a powerful man choose integrity over comfort. Preston could have paid Calvin off and buried the story. But he didn't. He protected Ava's dignity like it was his own. Later that day, Preston returned to the office to find Ava already waiting in the lobby, holding something small and square in her hand. "A pumpkin," she said, offering it to him. "For the office. Fall is for new things, right?" He smiled and took it gently. "Yes, it is." She followed him to the 44th floor and began her usual routine, wiping frames, aligning pens. But her eyes held a question. "Is he going to ruin everything?" she finally asked. "No," Preston said. "He tried, but people see through performances. They saw you." Ava sat on the couch, tucking her legs under her hoodie. "I don't want Mama to be scared. She cried last night." Preston knelt beside her. "She doesn't have to be, and neither do you. What you did, what you're still doing, it's already bigger than anything he can undo." Ava looked at the wall behind his desk. The photo of Lainey, her own letter framed now, the tiny drawing of soup and speech bubbles, and beside them something new, a corkboard with sketches of the scholarship logo, drawn by Ava herself. That wall had become more than decoration. It was a record of rebirth. This part always hits me. It's not just about the moment Ava walked in. It's about what grew after, what stayed. She didn't just shake the CEO, she rebuilt him. That Friday, Preston held a town hall at the company auditorium. Employees filed in with curiosity and a touch of skepticism. Rumors of the Calvin situation had reached everyone. But when Preston stepped up to the mic, he didn't look nervous. He looked certain. "Many of you have heard about the Maya Ellis Scholarship." He paused, then corrected himself. "Ava Ellis Scholarship." A ripple of whispers. "I want to be clear. This isn't a PR stunt. It's a commitment, a promise that the quiet work, the invisible effort of children who carry burdens they shouldn't have to, is finally seen." Then he invited Ava to the stage. She stepped up, notebook in hand, chin high, voice steady. "I wrote something," she said. "It's called What I Learned in a Tall Building." She read, "I learned that shiny floors don't mean people are happy. I learned that some people look scary, but are just tired. I learned that if you bring soup, people remember it. I learned that stories make buildings warmer." The room was silent. Even the executives in the back row blinked away moisture. "I think," Ava said, closing her notebook, "that bravery doesn't wear suits. Sometimes it wears sneakers and cleans under desks." Applause erupted. People stood. Some cried. Preston stepped beside her. "And sometimes," he said, "bravery is 8 years old and changes the way an entire company thinks." A standing ovation from corporate executives isn't easy, but Ava didn't demand it. She earned it. Not with noise, with presence. Over the following weeks, Ava helped design the outreach program, color themes, brochure sketches, even the final quote on the cover. If someone cares enough to notice, courage can't hide. The scholarship panel selected 3 recipients: Maria, 9, who tutored her siblings every night; Jaden, 11, who worked part-time to help pay the rent; and Aisha, 8, who translated for her grandmother at every medical appointment. Preston stood with them at the announcement event. Cameras flashed. Soup simmered in the background. Linda's famous ginger chickpea stew. Glenda handed out cornbread wrapped in napkins. And Ava stood at the podium, holding her tiny purple ribbon for courage. "I'm not the best cleaner," she said with a grin, "but I think I'm a good rememberer. I remember what it feels like when someone says, 'You matter,' and now we get to say that to more kids." She could have said anything, but she chose that. You matter. That's what real leadership is. Not telling people what to do, but reminding them why they're worth doing it. Back in his office that evening, Preston sat alone. The wall behind him wasn't just a collage anymore. It was a museum of awakening. Lainey's photo, Ava's drawings, scholarship posters, the tiny pumpkin now next to a sprouting sunflower in a clay pot labeled Hope. He opened a fresh page in his notebook. Leadership memo, in honor of Ava Ellis. And he wrote, "Leadership isn't about making noise. It's about making space, about who you invite in, even when it's inconvenient, and about recognizing that sometimes the truest leaders are those who wipe down your desk without ever asking to be seen." He closed the notebook and finally reached for the one letter he hadn't opened yet, a blank envelope Ava had given him weeks ago. Inside, he slipped a folded page of his own, written not to a board, not to the press, but to Lainey. "Dear Lainey, a little girl reminded me that I never told you thank you. For the books, for the soup, for the cat, for everything I ignored because I was too busy trying to become someone powerful. I wish you could meet her. She's braver than me and kinder. But maybe I'm becoming more like her. Love, Preston." He sealed it, tucked it beneath the photo, and with a quiet smile he whispered into the room, "Thank you for waiting." Final reflection. What started with a little girl stepping into a billionaire's office in an oversized janitor's uniform ended with an entire organization learning how to feel again. No policy can replace presence. No press release can fabricate connection. Ava Ellis didn't ask for anything. She just showed up. And sometimes that's the bravest thing any of us can do.